I bet you probably walked into a building today. Maybe it was a coffee shop to grab a quick latte, or I don't know, a library, or just an office building.
Right. Yeah. We all do it every single day.
Exactly. And when you walked through those doors, you did something entirely automatic. You placed this subconscious foundational trust in the system.
Oh, absolutely.
You just assume that someone somewhere has made sure that space is actually safe. You trust the ceiling isn't going to collapse, that the electrical wires hidden behind the drywall aren't, about to spark.
Yeah, and critically, that if something goes terribly wrong, there is a clear way out.
Right?
It is a massive, invisible contract of modern life. We outsource all our risk assessment to city planners, structural engineers, fire inspectors, and zoning boards.
Because we have to, right?
Exactly. We have to do this because if you or I had to stop and demand to see the structural integrity reports and fire safety compliance certificates for every single building we entered.
Oh man, society would just grind to an absolute halt.
Right, it would. We rely entirely on the premise that the safety regulations written down on paper are actually being enforced in physical reality.
And this is what we're getting into today. What happens when that contract is just a complete fiction?
Yeah, when it just doesn't exist.
What happens when a city government is simultaneously taxing a building as a commercial business while legally classifying it as a residential home and completely ignoring the fact that it lacks a single fire escape?
That's a fatal gap.
It is. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking closely at that fatal gap between bureaucratic paperwork and physical reality. We're getting into the details of the Aliganj fire tragedy.
Yeah, which took place on June 22, 2026.
Right, in Lucknow, India. And our mission for this deep dive is to look at the anatomy of this disaster. We want to understand how cascading systemic negligence turned what should have been, a completely preventable spark into a devastating trap.
Unpacking these mechanisms is so vital because a disaster like this, it isn't just about fire physics or a single faulty wire. It is about a complex web of institutional blindness. It shows us exactly how the illusion of public safety is maintained and, unfortunately, what the human cost is when that illusion completely shatters.
Wow. Yeah. Well, let's start by establishing the physical space because everything about this afternoon in Lucknow felt entirely mundane.
Totally normal day.
Exactly. So it's June 22. It is around 3:00 p.m. in the Purania area of Aliganj, specifically on a really busy street called Usha Mehta Marg.
Right.
And we're looking at a pretty standard 3-story building. Down on the ground floor, you have a retail space, which was a pet shop called Gruel's Pet Shop.
Yeah, and then above that pet shop, the building transforms into this, hub of youth and ambition.
Right.
Because the upper floors house an establishment called Learning Space, which functions as a coaching center and a library for students.
Okay.
And right next to that is Head Hopper Studio, which is this workspace dedicated to 3D animation and game design.
So you have dozens of young people inside, mostly in their early 20s. Think 20 to 24 years old. They are heads down, completely absorbed in their futures. They're studying for hyper-competitive exams. They're rendering animation portfolios. It's just a quiet, productive afternoon.
Just a normal Tuesday.
Exactly. And then down on the ground floor inside the pet shop, there's a spark.
Yeah. The investigation points to an electrical overload or possibly a short circuit in the air conditioning unit of the pet shop.
Which makes sense. It's a hot afternoon.
Exactly. It's incredibly hot, so the ACs are likely running at maximum capacity. A wire overheats, insulation melts, copper touches copper, and it arcs.
Wow.
And that spark finds combustible material in the shop, and suddenly a fire takes hold.
Now, a fire on the ground floor is obviously an immediate crisis. But the design of this specific building essentially weaponized that fire against everyone on those upper floors.
Oh, completely.
When you look at the layout, the only analogy that makes sense mechanically is, it's a dead-end funnel.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
Right. Because in this entire 3-story building, which is packed with students and professionals, there was only one staircase.
Just one.
Just one. It was the only way up to the library and the studios, and it was the only way down to the street.
Which is terrifying when you think about the physics of a fire in a confined space. Because heat and smoke, they're less dense than the cooler air around them.
Right.
So they naturally and rapidly rise. When a fire breaks out on the ground floor, that single open staircase stops functioning as a walkway. It physically transforms into a chimney.
A literal chimney.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The heat creates a powerful updraft, sucking in oxygen from the street level and just blasting, superheated, toxic black smoke straight up that stairwell to the second and third floors.
So the young people upstairs, they obviously realize what is happening. They smell the smoke, the alarms, if there even were any, go off, and they rush for the stairs.
But by then, the stairs are completely impassable.
Right. The heat is searing, the smoke is blinding and toxic, and this is where the trap just snaps shut. Because there was absolutely no emergency exit. None at all.
No.
There was no metal fire escape bolted to the exterior of the building. There was no secondary route to, like, a neighboring roof.
And when you remove all structural avenues of escape, human beings are forced into impossible, desperate choices in a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, the smoke is displacing the oxygen in the rooms, the temperature is spiking to lethal levels, and the only designated exit is literally a column of fire and toxic gas.
The accounts from that afternoon are just harrowing.
They really are.
You had young people hanging out of the upper windows, desperately trying to climb down the outside of the concrete building using, like, loose electrical wires and cables.
It's just unimaginable panic.
It is. One youth realized the wires wouldn't hold and was forced to jump straight from the third floor to the street below, sustaining severe injuries just to escape the suffocation.
And tragically, many didn't even have the option of those desperate measures.
No.
The smoke inhalation incapacitated them before they could even reach a window. They were simply trapped inside the rooms where they had been quietly studying just minutes before.
It's just heartbreaking. 15 people lost their lives in that building.
15.
And when you look at who is actually inside, it entirely grounds the tragedy. These aren't just abstract statistics for us to talk about on a deep dive.
No, these were real lives.
Right. Out of the 15 victims, let's just name a few to understand who was lost. There was Sukhmani, who had gone to the studio that day just to learn animation.
Yeah.
There was Shazan, who was pouring his energy into building a career in design. And Anamika, who was sitting quietly in the library, dedicating her afternoon to preparing for competitive exams.
These were individuals doing exactly what society asked of them. They were studying, they were working, they were trying to build a stable future.
Yeah.
They walked into that commercial space relying on that exact invisible contract we discussed at the start.
Right. They assumed, logically, that a functioning business in the middle of the city had been inspected and deemed safe for occupancy.
Exactly. So that brings us to the glaring question. How does a building operating as a literal death trap exist in plain sight?
That is the core of this whole investigation.
Right. When you look at a tragedy like this, the immediate question is about the mechanics of the failure. Because it turns out, this wasn't a sudden, unpredictable accident.
Not at all.
No, it was an engineered disaster, years in the making.
Decades, almost.
Yeah. The investigation maps out this glaring disconnect between the paper trail deep in City Hall and the concrete reality on Usha Mehta Marg. And it starts all the way back in 2014.
Right, so a full decade before the fire, the blueprint for this specific building was formally approved by the city strictly for residential use.
Okay.
It was legally designated to be a house, but year by year, it drifted away from that legal definition.
Like they usually do. Exactly. Walls were knocked down, spaces were retrofitted. It transformed from a private home into a bustling commercial hub, housing a pet shop, a medical clinic, a large library, and an animation studio.
Okay, wait, hold on. I have to ask about this contradiction from the source material. If the city legally classified this building as a residential home on their blueprints, how was the municipal corporation collecting commercial tax on this property since 2022?
It's a massive contradiction.
The records show the city was officially taking commercial tax payments for years. How can a government body happily cash commercial tax checks with one hand while completely ignoring the commercial safety codes with the other? Doesn't collecting the tax mean they absolutely knew it was operating as a business?
You would think so, right?
Right.
But it highlights the lethal dysfunction of bureaucratic silos.
Silos, right.
You have to picture how a municipal office actually functions. The tax collection department has one mandate: maximize revenue based on current usage. If an inspector or an assessor sees a business operating, their job is to update the ledger and charge the higher commercial tax rate. They enter it into their database, the bill goes out, the owner pays it.
Right.
But that tax database does not talk to the zoning board. It does not send an alert to the fire department saying, hey, a residential home just became a commercial library. Someone needs to inspect the emergency exits.
Oh, wow. So the tax department updating its ledger just legitimizes the illegal operation in the eyes of the building owner.
Exactly.
The owner writes the check and thinks, I'm paying my commercial taxes to the city, so my business must be completely above board.
It's a fragmented system, and it allows the building to exist in this, like, twilight zone.
A twilight zone.
Yeah, it's a commercial entity for the purpose of revenue.
Yeah.
But it remains a residential entity when it comes to the expensive, rigorous safety compliance required for public spaces.
Let's talk about the electricity, because this is where the physical infrastructure was screaming that it was overloaded, and it perfectly illustrates this twilight zone you're talking about.
Oh, the electrical discrepancies are shocking.
Right. The official records from the electricity department showed the building was approved for a 20 kilowatt load.
Which is a standard residential load.
Exactly. But in reality, with the heavy air conditioners for the pet shop, the server racks for the 3D animation studio, the lighting for the library, they were continuously pulling 35.50 kilowatts.
Wow. Pulling 35.5 kilowatts through a system legally and physically designed for 20 is a textbook ticking time bomb.
Literally.
Electrical wires are rated for specific capacities based on their gauge. When you force nearly double the current through those wires, you run into Joule heating.
Right. Basic physics.
Exactly. The resistance in the copper generates immense heat. Day after day, month after month, that heat slowly degrades and melts the plastic insulation wrapping the wires inside the walls.
So it ceases to be a question of if a catastrophic short circuit will happen.
It is purely a mathematical countdown to when.
The infrastructure was quietly melting down, but nobody from the city ever looked.
No one checked.
And because nobody looked, the final layers of safety simply didn't exist.
Right.
There was no fire NOC. No objection certificate from the fire department, which, as we know, is the baseline legal requirement for a commercial space. There was no building safety certificate. There were 0 emergency exits. Just a complete, absolute vacuum where public safety protocols were supposed to be.
It represents the total collapse of the regulatory safety net. The laws governing emergency exits and fire extinguishers existed in dense manuals somewhere, but they were entirely theoretical to the people studying in that library.
Yeah, but of course, when the inevitable finally happens and 15 people die because of this systemic vacuum, the authorities are forced to react.
They always are.
The immediate government response was swift, obviously driven by immense public outrage. Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath canceled his scheduled appointments, visited the site personally to ascertain the damage, and met with the grieving families.
Right.
And on the administrative side, 4 local officials were suspended immediately for negligence.
The state also formed a special investigation team, or SIT.
Okay, an SIT?
Yeah, this is a specialized task force assembled specifically to conduct a deep, dedicated probe into a high-profile incident, pulling resources from various departments to, like, bypass the usual bureaucratic sluggishness.
Makes sense.
Simultaneously, law enforcement filed First Information Reports, FIRs, which officially initiate the criminal justice process in India. And that led to the arrest of 3 individuals, including the owner of the building.
It's fascinating and honestly a bit predictable to watch how quickly a structural failure turns into a political football.
Oh, it happens almost instantly.
Right. The political fallout started almost the moment the fire was put out. Right. And we want to be very clear to you, our listeners, that we are just impartially reporting what the sources outline here. We are not taking sides.
Absolutely not. We're just looking at the mechanics of the blame game.
Exactly. We are seeing a classic deflection cycle where every party claims the groundwork for the disaster was laid by their rivals. From the right-wing perspective, the current government, represented by the BJP's Deputy Chief Minister Burjesh Pathak, pointed the finger directly at the opposition.
Yeah.
He argued that the illegal commercialization of the Usha Mehta Marg building actually occurred years ago during the Samajwadi Party's time in power.
Which is a common defense.
Right. He even stated that a demolition order had been issued for the illegal structure back in 2016, but was inexplicably canceled by that very same SP administration.
So the argument there is essentially that the current administration inherited a rigged system and the fuse was lit a decade ago by their opponents.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the left-wing opposition, the SP, deflected that blame right back onto the current government.
Actually.
SP chief Akhilesh Yadav questioned the integrity of the newly formed special investigation team. He raised public doubts about whether the current administration could impartially investigate its own municipal failures.
Right.
And he demanded transparency regarding the handling of the CCTV footage from the afternoon of the fire.
Then you have a third-party critique stepping in.
Yeah, let's look at that.
The BSP chief, Mayawati, publicly criticized both the BJP and the SP. She stated that this endless loop of political finger-pointing does absolutely nothing to solve the underlying daily threat to public safety.
Well, looking at all these political perspectives, the irony is glaring.
It really is.
Because when those 15 young people were trapped on the second and third floors, choking on thick black smoke, there was no political party in that building.
Yeah.
There was no government in that building. There was only a negligent system that failed them from top to bottom.
Because a fire does not care which political party canceled a demolition order in 2016.
Exactly.
Or who is currently managing a task force in 2026. A fire only obeys the laws of physics. It cares that there was combustible fuel, a degraded wire to provide a spark, and an architectural funnel with no secondary exit.
This political stalling, it pivots us to the most frustrating part of this entire analysis.
Yeah, the historical context.
This is not an isolated incident. It is a heavily entrenched, fatal pattern of normalizing extreme risk. You don't have to look far back in the historical record to see the exact same mechanisms failing over and over again.
It's a long list.
It is.
Yeah.
There was the Badohi Durga Puja Pandal fire in 2022, the John C. Medical College fire, a massive factory fire in Hapur, and just a few months before this Aliganj tragedy, an April 2026 slum fire, also in Lucknow.
If we look closely at something like the Lavana Hotel fire, which happened in the exact same city a few years prior, the parallels are deeply disturbing.
Oh, so?
Well, you had a prominent, wealthy commercial building operating with blocked exits, improper ventilation, and safety certificates that didn't match the physical reality of the building.
It's the exact same story.
The cycle is identical every single time. A tragedy occurs, public outrage spikes, a task force is formed, arrests are made, promises of strict enforcement are broadcast on the news.
Right.
And then institutional amnesia sets in until the next spark.
Why does the amnesia always win? The underlying analysis points to three main institutional mechanisms that basically guarantee this cycle will repeat.
Right. Let's break those down.
First, fire safety norms are broadly culturally treated as suggestions rather than strict laws. Thousands of buildings open their doors every morning without a valid fire safety certificate.
Yeah. The second mechanism is the reality of the paper inspection.
Right, the paper inspection.
This is how the system bypasses physical reality. An inspector might sit in an air-conditioned municipal office miles away from the property.
Okay.
They pull up a blueprint from 2014 that says residential home. They stamp the paper, sign their name, and file it away, never physically visiting the site to see the brightly lit pet shop and the 3D animation studio that were built in the meantime.
Or, if they do physically visit the site, we hit the third mechanism, a pervasive system of bribery.
Which is the most insidious part.
It is. An official can walk into a building, clearly see the single staircase, note the complete lack of fire extinguishers, and simply accept a cash payment to sign the compliance form anyway.
Right.
When you combine culturally ignored norms, blind paper inspections, and the ability to basically buy your way out of life-saving regulations, you aren't just ignoring the risk of fire. You are actively engineering a disaster, just waiting for the right hot afternoon and a struggling air conditioner.
It leaves the public in a highly vulnerable position. We are operating under that invisible contract of trust, assuming the stamped paper in the municipal office means the building is physically safe, when in reality, the paper means nothing.
But we can't just end on a note of helplessness.
No, absolutely not.
Public safety cannot be entirely outsourced to a bureaucratic system that has repeatedly proven it has massive, fatal blind spots.
We have to take back some agency.
We do. We have to break that subconscious habit of walking into a building and assuming someone else has done the risk assessment for us. Taking this right back to you, the listener, the source actually lays out 5 actionable mechanical things you need to actively look for the next time you walk into a coffee shop, a mall, a library, or a new office.
These are so important. Step 1, physically locate the emergency exit.
Right.
Don't just assume there is a back door. Look for the illuminated sign. Look for the hardware on the door. Ensure it isn't chain shut or blocked by delivery boxes.
I see that all the time. Delivery boxes just piled up.
Exactly.
Step 2, look for a fire extinguisher. Is it mounted on the wall where everyone can easily see it, or is it hidden away in some back closet?
Step 3, and this is absolutely critical given the chimney effect we saw in Aliganj, is there more than one staircase?
Yeah, that funnel effect.
Exactly. If a fire starts on the ground floor and smoke fills the primary stairwell, how are you getting down from the second floor? If there is no second route, you are in a funnel.
Step 4, look at the ceiling. Are there smoke detectors and water sprinklers actually installed?
And step 5, which is socially the hardest, but mechanically the most important. If these basic safety features are missing, you have to reconsider staying in that building.
Yeah.
And further, you need to report that unsafe structure to the local fire department, because the silence and the assumption of safety are exactly what allow these dangerous spaces to continue operating.
Right. Don't just sit down and think, it'll be fine. I'm only going to be here for an hour studying. Because the young people in the Learning Space Library thought the exact same thing on a Tuesday afternoon.
It forces us to confront a really uncomfortable psychological bias.
What's that?
Think about how the polished aesthetic of a modern business, like a sleek, minimalist 3D animation studio with exposed brick, or a brightly lit, beautifully merchandised pet shop, how that lulls us into a false sense of security.
Oh, wow. Yeah. We conflate a really nice interior design with structural safety.
We do. We unconsciously assume that if a place looks wealthy, successful, and highly professional on the inside, the unseen structural safety, the wiring, the fire escapes, the permits, they must be equally sound and professional.
Right, because it looks nice.
But wallpaper and neon signs don't stop smoke.
No, they don't.
The next time you walk into a beautifully decorated, buzzing commercial space, take a pause at the door.
Yep.
Ask yourself, are you trusting the aesthetics of the business or the actual architecture of the building?
Wow. That is a question that completely changes how you navigate the world. The next time I walk into a cafe, I'm not just going to trust that the invisible contract is holding up the ceiling. I'm going to actually look for the second exit.
We all need to start looking.
We do. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Take care of yourselves and stay safe.